there listening to him, I was wondering who he was talking about. My favorite introduction took place, however, in a little small country church down in Virginia, near Danville, Virginia. I went down to speak to a youth group there. They invited me to come. It's been almost 20 years ago now. I went down to speak with them, and the young lady got up to introduce me, and she says, we're so grateful to the Lord for Reverend Watts, that he would come all the way from Charleston, West Virginia to speak to our small youth group. And she said, the best thing that I can say about Reverend Watts is that he's come and he's agreed to speak for free. She said, because he's agreed to speak for free, we can take the honorarium for the speaker, put it back in the treasury, and get a better speaker next year. So I'm here tonight, and I've come just across the street, and I did agree to come and speak for free.
We were going to give mileage.
I remember a story of a young boy who was having difficulty with his mathematics. We knew it in Mount Hope, where I grew up, as arithmetic. And he was struggling with his arithmetic, and so his mother had become quite exasperated over his inability to master the subject matter, and she thought that he was not putting forth enough effort. And so she had threatened him, and nothing seemed to work, so she decided to take him out of public school and enroll him in the parochial, the Catholic school, where they have a tremendous tradition for high-quality education. And after just a week, the young man was coming home with A's in every math class, every assignment, every test. And after the first grading period, he had an A+ in arithmetic. And the mother just couldn't believe the transformation that had taken place, and she was a little bit nervous, and she thought if she said anything, she may upset the apple cart. So she didn't say it for several months, but finally her curiosity got the best of her. And she said, well, son, tell me, what caused the great turnaround? I mean, how did you turn this thing around from failing every single test, an E on every single assignment, to making A+? And here's what he said. He said, the first day I went to that Catholic school, and I went into that classroom, and I saw where they had nailed that fellow that plus sign. I knew they meant business. Well, I mean business. Amen. I mean business. And when I left Union Carbide in December of 1996, after travailing over for some period of time, I had a great run there. I had a great career. People really nurtured me and gave me tremendous opportunities, and I had the opportunity maybe to advance to the corporate office in Danbury, Connecticut. But that was a tug on my heart. It was an irresistible call to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to give myself full-time, undivided attention, the best hours of the day, and the best energy that I had to offer, and to try to pour my life into the youth of this community. And so at the time, with the wife and 5 children, and just before my 40th birthday, I didn't retire, I quit. See, when you retire, you keep getting the check. And when you quit, you're on your own. And I never regretted it. I never looked back. Not one single moment have I regretted my decision, because it was the right thing for me to do. I could not speak the way I wanted to speak, with the passion and with the commitment and with the courage, and have all of the comforts and conveniences that the corporate arena afforded me. Nor do I feel like I had the liberty to speak. I had to be a free man. And I could only have one boss, and that was the Lord Jesus Christ. And so I had to be able to speak to the issues, and to speak to them with profundity, and to speak the truth to power, and be prepared to accept whatever the consequences that might come my way. I'm not a social scientist. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an educator. I'm a preacher. I'm a pastor. And I'm a preacher in the vein of the New Testament, a prophet, to speak the truth. I characterize myself as a truth seeker. And where the truth leads is where I want to go. And so if the truth indicts me, then I'm indicted for apathy or indifference or lack of vision, passion, or courage. If the truth indicts the system of the United States of America because of its injustices and oppression toward any group of people, then I'm duty-bound by my calling to speak the truth. And so there are some that would say to me, you can just be quiet. You would tone this thing down and just pastor this church over here with your nice middle-class congregation and quit trying to address these social issues. Then you would have the support of the community my calling is to be true to the Lord who called me to preach the truth, to try to live and to practice the truth, and to try to model the truth, and to not look for a comfortable, cozy, convenient place to settle down and to do ministry. Because the truth is always adversarial. It always creates tension. It always forces people to be uncomfortable, particularly those who control the economic, political, and the social system. And so tonight I'm going to say some things that I believe that are the truth. They're the truth not because I believe it, because I'm going to say it. They're the truth because it's been researched, it's been documented, and the data sources I'm going to be referring to are not sources that Matthew Watts has generated, but they're public sources that the federal government, state government, and civic government produce. The title of my presentation, as it is on the flyer, is Crisis in the Black Community in West Virginia. Does anybody care? And I did not give that title to be inflammatory or to get an audience. I gave that title because I'm asking the question. There is a crisis in the African American community in West Virginia. And a native West Virginian who lived 44 of his 46 years here, I really wonder, does anyone really care? Because I do not hear from our political leaders, economic leaders, or social leaders, anyone articulating the issues. As a matter of fact, the issues do not even percolate to the top of anyone's agenda. And so they continue to be forced down to the bottom of the pile, and there's not even any discussion about these issues that are plaguing the African American community. So I'm going to talk basically about 4 areas where I believe there's a serious crisis in the African American community. There's a crisis in education, there's a crisis with unemployment, there's a crisis in the healthcare arena, there's a crisis within the criminal justice system. And I'm going to look at those 4 areas and delineate why I believe there's a serious crisis that threatens the very survival of the African American community. And because the African American community is inextricably woven into the fabric of the society, then the very society itself is in serious trouble if these issues aren't addressed. First of all, the crisis in education. Several years ago, the United States Office of Civil Rights came to West Virginia and they audited several school systems. Kanawha County was one of those school systems. And the Office of Civil Rights cited Kanawha County and Raleigh County for an overrepresentation of African American youth in special education, mild, mentally impaired, behavioral disorder, learning disabilities, and educable mentally retarded. Overrepresentation of black youth, a disproportionate overrepresentation of black youth in the special education program, and a significant underrepresentation of black youth in the gifted program. As a matter of fact, after some investigation was done, it was found that there were a number of black youth that had scored considerably high on the Stat 9 test that's given for grades 3 through 11 in the Kanawha County schools, yet they were not identified to be tested for the gifted program. Since the OCR's citing of Kanawha County, and to his credit, Dr. Ron Doran and his staff, they have put together a response team to try to address this overrepresentation issue that the experts refer to as disproportionality, a disproportionate overrepresentation of blacks in special education. And they are trying to address that issue, and they have been able to identify more African American youth that now have been tested and placed in the gifted program. Not only is there a significant overrepresentation of blacks in the special education program and underrepresentation in the gifted program, when you look at the disciplinary referrals, it literally went off the scale in terms of how disproportionately black youth are referred to the Office for Discipline and suspended or expelled from school. It was almost 50% higher in some schools for black youth versus their white counterparts. But the crisis continues. The superintendent of Kanawha County Schools, Dr. Ron Doran, released a report several months ago that dealt with what's referred to as the achievement gap. We had went to Dr. Doran, some of us from the community, and we had enlisted support of AEL, an educational consultant, and asked them to disaggregate the data, the achievement test data, Students in Kanawha County, grades 3 through 11, take the Stanford 9 test. 8th graders take the Explorer. And of course, juniors and seniors take the college entrance exam, the ACT, and the SAT. When the data was disaggregated, when you separated the data out, black, white, male, female, black, male, white, you separate the data out, what you discovered was that at every grade level, 3 through 11 on the Stanford 9, there was a significant achievement gap between blacks and whites, as much as 25 percentile points. When you looked at the African American males, what you found was that the African American males were testing at about 50% or higher of the national average, 50 percentile, which meant that basically they were scoring at about half of what the rest of the nation was scoring, right in the middle. But when you track the African American males through the educational experience, by the time that they got to high school, they had lost ground every year. They were losing ground every year on the Stanford 9 test. A huge gap. My good friend Gordon Rose Sr., who just came in, has been talking about this for a number of years as an educator inside the system, trying to express to some of us his concern over the fact that black youth were not getting the proper education that they needed to get and should get in Kanawha County School. And he is proven to be a prophet, and the data shows it clearly. But it's worse than that. Not only is there an achievement gap, every grade level, 3 through 11 of Stanford 9, and the 8th grade Explorer, when you get to the college entrance exams, the ACT and the SAT, what you find is that low-income whites in the non-college preparatory program are scoring higher than high-income blacks in the college preparatory program as a group. That's why several months ago, we had spoken publicly about the whole issue of the Promise Scholarship. The Promise Scholarship is a good idea. And don't anybody go away saying the Reverend White said the Promise Scholarship is not a good idea. The problem I have with the Promise Scholarship, and the article in the newspaper this morning supports what we said several months ago, that the Promise Scholarship, as designed, will not significantly benefit poor youth anywhere, black or white, because of the criteria. The criteria of the Promise says that you have to have a 3.0 or B grade point average in certain core classes. And then you must score at least 21 on a single ACT test, or have a combined score of 1,000 on the SAT. And if anybody knows anything about those college entrance exams, they know that, as a rule, poor youth do not score well on those college entrance exams. As a matter of fact, if anybody knows anything about those exams, when those exams were first introduced, they were not introduced as tools to determine who got to go to college. They were introduced to try to create a level playing field, because before the college entrance exam, it was who you know, were your parents and alumni from a school, could you get someone to get you into school? So the tests were created to give low-income people and people who didn't have the connections a way of demonstrating that they did have the abilities to go to college. Now they're being used to keep folk out of colleges, and they're being used to divvy up the money, as with the Promise Scholarship. And so what would happen with the Promise Scholarship is that most of the promised money will go to youth from higher income families. And that's going to happen. And the architects of the Promise Scholarship, I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt, but I cannot believe that they did not know that. Because if they did not know that, they did not do their homework. They did not look at the test data that is disaggregated by income level. And if they did know that, shame on them for trying to pass that off as some equal opportunity, equal access to funding. What I postulated is that with the Promise Scholarship, what it ought to be for those kids who play by the rules, who work hard, and who graduate from college, and who indeed are accepted into college, I believe that any kid who gets accepted into college to qualify for the Promise. But then they have to keep a certain grade point average to maintain their eligibility throughout the school year. So another problem I have with the Promise is that when you graduate from high school, that's when you have to qualify for the Promise. So if you borrowed $20,000 to go to college the first year because you didn't make a 21 on the ACT or 1,000 on the SAT, then go and have a 4.0 average your freshman year, you still can't qualify for the promise because you can only qualify when you graduate from high school. Now, I'm not being critical of the promise, but I believe that necessity is the mother of invention. Evaluation is the mother of improvement. And so I believe that there's a good idea, and the promise is a good idea. Let's make it a better idea. And let's look at how we can be more inclusive and help some of those students who are bona fide college material. We have a student we're working with that could not make but an 18 on the ACT test, no matter how hard this individual tried, took the test 3 times. Had a 3.75 grade point average coming out of high school, had taken chemistry, physics, all the advanced math courses, went to the University of Charleston and had a 3.4 grade point average, taking 16 hours, including chemistry, biology, advanced math, and a second semester college English class. But they wouldn't have qualified for the promise because they couldn't make the 21 on the test. We need to look at the promise and look at how we can improve it and expand it. But there's an education crisis. The overrepresentation, disproportionality, the achievement gap issue speaks to a serious, serious crisis in education. And in America, education determines employment opportunity. Employment opportunity determines income. Income determines quality of living in this nation. That's the way it is. We are past a manufacturing, past an industrial economy. We're now into the technology information age. All the shoes have been shined, all the cotton has been picked. There's no more need for a whole lot of unskilled manual labor. And so without critical thinking skills, those cognitive skills, the ability to process information, the ability to articulate and to communicate, then there's no place in this society for poor youth, black or white. And so that's why we have this serious education crisis that must be addressed. The education crisis in the African American community, it manifests itself in the unemployment crisis. But several years ago, I took about 4 months to try to figure out what in the world are the unemployment statistics. I just assumed that everybody understood it, and I was the only one who didn't really understand what the unemployment statistics meant until I started asking questions. And what I found is there were very few people who really understood what the unemployment statistics meant. So I took about 3 or 4 months to really try to study, try to figure out what exactly does it mean. Does the unemployment statistics mean that X number of % of people are unemployed at any given time? That would be a natural deduction, but that's not correct. That's not what the unemployment statistics mean. So when it says, like it said this past week in the Charleston Gazette, that the unemployment in West Virginia was 6.1%, it does not mean that 6.1% of the people in West Virginia are unemployed. That's not what it means. What it means is that of all the people who are looking for work, or the people who are drawing unemployment benefits, of that percentage of people who are trying to find work and who are still drawing unemployment benefits, 6.1% of those people are unemployed. So if a person has exhausted their unemployment benefits, they don't get counted. If a person is no longer looking for work, they don't get counted. If a person is someone who is 18 and 19, 20, 21, and who's never been gainfully employed in full-time employment, who's never received unemployment benefits, they don't get counted. So the statistics are very misleading. And what they really tell you is not how many people are unemployed, but the unemployment statistics tells an employer how difficult it's going to be for them to hire people from the pool of people who are looking for work. That's what it really says. And so you can compare the unemployment statistic, West Virginia versus Pennsylvania and Virginia, and it will say that in this state, it's going to be more difficult for you to hire qualified, competent people who are looking for work, because the people who are looking for work, that population is shrinking. But when you fall off the radar screen, you don't get counted. So there are thousands of people in West Virginia who are unemployed who never get counted in the unemployment statistics. Are you following? So when you look at an analysis of the unemployment statistics, here's what we found. We found that the data that the Bureau of Employment Program receives is called from the current survey. All the unemployment statistics in the United States are derived from a sample of only 50,000 people. They sample 50,000 people across the United States of America. They only sample about 775 people in each state, with the exception of those states where there's a high Hispanic population, because they're concentrated in a few states. They sample more people so they can get enough data to come up with an unemployment rate for the Hispanic population. So in West Virginia, only 775 people are surveyed monthly, and from that 775 survey, they put it through a sophisticated mathematical formula, they extrapolate it, and they come up with these unemployment statistics. Now here's the problem. Is that at any given time, you can survey 775 people in West Virginia. Since there are only 56,000 black people in the state, in any given month, you may not survey anybody black. If you don't target Charleston, Huntington, Beckley, or Wheeling, you may not even get anybody black. So there's often not enough data to really come up with an accurate unemployment rate for blacks. So we challenged the accuracy and the veracity of the unemployment statistics. I wrote a letter to the then governor, Underwood, and met with he and some of his senior staff people and said, this is totally misleading. You're issuing these unemployment statistics. You're saying to the community unemployment rate is down. At that time, I think it was under 5%, the lowest it had been in the history of them tabulating unemployment statistics. And I say, so what that says, when we go to try to talk to employers and say, look, we got 20% black folk unemployed, they tell us we don't know what we're talking about. We do know what we're talking about. Your statistics are wrong. Dr. Ed Merrifield, recently retired director of the Bureau of Research and Analysis, took my challenge, went back for 3 years, did a complete analysis of all the unemployment statistics between 1995 and 1997. He issued a letter to Deborah Hart, who was the then director of the EEO, and basically said this is in response to Reverend Watts' questions concerning unemployment statistics. Merrifield went on to say that based on my analysis between 95 and 97, the unemployment rate for blacks as a group was at least 2.5 to 3 times higher than that from the reported unemployment rate. During that period of time, the unemployment rate that was being published was 7%, 7.4%. He said the unemployment rate for blacks is at least 15%, and that's being conservative. He went on to say that the unemployment rate for black males between the age of 19 and 24 probably somewhere around 25% at any given time. He went on to say that the unemployment rate for black youth, or for youth in general, is always significantly higher than the unemployment rate for adults. The national unemployment rate for youth at the time was about 14.3%. The unemployment rate for white youth in West Virginia was about 25%. But Merrifield went on to say the unemployment rate for black youth is at least 50%, if not higher. I have copies of the letter which Dr. Merrifield copied me on. So he says we have this serious problem of unemployment, and at any given time, what you see in the newspaper totally masks the true unemployment rate for everybody, and it significantly understates the unemployment rate for blacks. Because since blacks only comprise 3.1% of the state's population, then if the unemployment rate for blacks was 100%, it would not significantly impact the overall unemployment rate for the state. Am I making sense? So the Bureau of Employment Program can put in the newspaper, well, the unemployment rate was 6.1%, and everybody said we can live with that. But within that 6.1%, if you disaggregate the data, you would find the unemployment rate for blacks maybe 20% or 25%, and you can't get anyone to engage in serious dialogue around that issue. Are you tracking with me? So now you move, and it's a natural progression. If you have a school system that is woefully inadequate in terms of educating African American students to high levels of achievement, that means that they're going to be at a silent disadvantage when it comes to competing for college scholarships and other funding. It means that they're then going to be at a silent disadvantage when it comes to employment opportunities. The unemployment rate is going to be much higher. The underemployment rate is going to be much higher. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a sociologist to figure this thing out. If you have high unemployment and high underemployment, and if you have people that live in a more urban community, you will see a rise in crime. And blacks in the state of West Virginia, for the most part, live in pretty densely compacted urban areas. 30% of the population of all blacks in the state of West Virginia live in Kanawha County, 30%. And that 30%, 80% of that live in Charleston. When you take Raleigh County, Kanawha County, DeKalb County, Fayette County, McDowell County, Jefferson County, and one other, you get about 80% of all black folk live in just those counties. And so now you've got blacks densely populated in areas where you have a more urban pathology. So, and here's what happens. And I'm going to talk at the end about this whole idea of this war on drugs, because this is going to destroy this country if we're not careful. So, but here's what's happening. According to the 2000 census data, check it out on the internet, front page article of the Charleston Gazette newspaper, it stated that blacks make up about 3.1 to 3.2% of the state's population, yet they comprise 33% of all the people in prisons and jails in the state of West Virginia. 1/3 of all the prison inmates in the jails and prisons in the West Virginia are from the black community. And no one is even talking about that like this is an issue. If there was such disproportionality within the white community, we wouldn't have enough jails for all the folk. But because we can build enough jails to incarcerate 1 in 50 black folk in the state, it's livable. It's manageable. And so no one even talks about it. It's worse. It gets worse than that. Carol Charlotte, with the American Friends Service Committee, issued a report, the results of which was produced in the Charleston Gazette and the Charleston Daily Mail, dealing with this whole issue of the overrepresentation of black youth in the juvenile justice system. West Virginia, the state of West Virginia, has the highest overrepresentation of black youth in its juvenile justice system than any state in the United States of America. West Virginia has an index of 5. 1.8 is considered high, and we have a 5. And the index is calculated by taking the number of youth that are in the juvenile justice system and then dividing it by the percent representation in the population. And so we have the highest overrepresentation of minority, primarily black youth in the juvenile justice system than any state in the United States of America, and no one is talking about it. Black youth are higher represented at every stage. A much higher arrest rate, a much higher detention rate, a much higher rate of transfer to adult status, a much higher incarceration rate than their white counterpart, and there's no discussion. In our wonderful city of Charleston in 2000, black juveniles comprised about 22% of Charleston's juvenile population. 22% of Charleston's juvenile population is black, yet black youth made up 52% of all arrests that were made by the Charleston PD of youth. Statewide, 20% of the juveniles placed in detention are black, 20% of youth admitted to corrections are black, and 53% of all juveniles who transferred to adult status are black. But no one's talking about it. I received a report before my friend Otis Cox left as the Secretary of Public Safety and Military Affairs. A study was commissioned to be done by George Washington University of West Virginia's correction system. George Washington University came back and said that West Virginia will see an increase of 1/3. Its prison population will increase by 1/3 between 2000 and 2005. And no one's talking about it. In the 1990s, when West Virginia almost every year had the lowest crime rate in the nation, during the same period of time in the 1990s, West Virginia had the fastest growth in its prison population. It was second only to George Bush's state of Texas. Only Texas had a faster growth in the prison population in the 90s than West Virginia, and no one's talking about it. This year, the West Virginia legislature will approve a budget for over $90+ million to incarcerate the inmates in this state. According to George Washington University's report, by the year 2005, the budget to incarcerate West Virginia's prisoners will be $150 million. But no one is talking about it. I want to come back to that, but I want to talk briefly about this health crisis and conclude with what's driving some of this prison growth. There's a health crisis that's looming. I'm not a physician, but I can read numbers and statistics. I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. If you look at what is taking place, the report issued by the Washington Department of Health points out the fact that blacks die from diabetes, a disease that's manageable and curable, die from diabetes at twice the rate of whites. That blacks die from homicide 4.5 times the rate of whites. Blacks die from prostate cancer twice the rate of whites. And here's one that ought to get everybody's attention, and that is the rise in sexually transmitted diseases. And there is a rise. There is a crisis out there, but we really aren't talking about it. We think that this thing has gone away. It hasn't gone away. And it's manifesting its ugly head in the minority community. Not because blacks are any more sexually promiscuous than whites. It's the access to health care. It is the taking advantage of preventive health care that causes some of these issues to go unaddressed. Listen to this closely. The Washington Department of Health, in their report, said that of all the reported AIDS cases in the state of West Virginia, 18% of all AIDS cases were in the black community. And blacks only make up 3.1 to 3.2 of the state's population. 39% of all reported HIV positive cases were in the black community. Yet no one is talking about that. It's a potential health crisis, not only for the black community, but for the white community. But let me tell you what I think the problem is. I might be wrong, but I don't think so. Well, I believe that you've seen a rise in the AIDS, HIV case in the black community at a much faster rate than the white community. It has to do with demographics. As I told you earlier, blacks live in these urban conclaves. And unfortunately, but the truth of the matter is, I'm a truth seeker now. We're going to go wherever it goes, right? The fact is, there are a lot of drug dealers that are coming from Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York, and these larger urban metroplexes, where there's a much higher HIV case. And I believe the reason we're seeing a higher HIV case in the black community is that as these drug dealers are coming in and they're establishing relationships with young people in our communities, they have a much higher HIV case, they're passing on the virus, so we're seeing an immediate increase or rise in HIV case. But it won't stay in the black community. Just like drugs, I never will forget when I went to see The Godfather, I couldn't believe it was on the screen when the man said, let's bring the drugs in and feed it to the darkies. And they were talking about bringing drugs to the inner cities and pouring the drugs to the inner cities of New York. Feed the drugs to the darkies. Everybody thought that drug abuse and addiction would remain in the urban community. And that's a problem for the United States of America. It didn't stay in the urban plantation. It's now out in the suburbs where all the money is. AIDS and HIV would do the same thing. Now, I don't know about you. I don't go to the town center mall much. I went two times in 2001. Haven't been yet in 2002. But as I walk the streets of Charleston, I notice that young folk today don't have all these racial hang-ups that some of us had and still have. And so as they are intermarried and interdating and so forth, once this thing crosses over, and once HIV gets up in these creeks and back up in these hollows where people never go to the doctors, once it spreads into the population at large, we potentially have a health crisis on our hands. As we will often do in this country, as long as there is a pathology that affects the black community, we think it's manageable. And we fail to realize that certain pathologies will metastasize and you cannot contain them in any one community. Just as drugs could not be contained within the African-American community, the HIV virus in West Virginia will not be contained in the African-American community. We got an opportunity to do something about it now, but because we suffer from this hang-up of talking about race and about racism and about the effects of things in West Virginia on black folk, it's not even politically correct to talk about it. Your label has been inflammatory, it's been non-inclusive, and black folks have been destroyed, and black folk themselves won't even talk about these issues. And if we cannot get people of goodwill from the white community to step up to the plate and realize that we may have came over on different boats, we're in the same ship now, and we better address these issues while they're in a size that we can address them, because after a while they get too big for us to do anything with. Well, I done went to presenting the preaching. Let me close my comments sham passed off on the American people than the war on drugs. The war on drugs will destroy the United States of America unless the American people wake up and realize that illegal drugs are inextricably woven to the fabric of the American economy. And illegal drugs contributed significantly to the boom of the 1980s and 1990s. And unless we're willing to face the truth, we will all perish. We will all perish living in denial. Most people do not know that until 1916, there was no such thing as an illegal drug. Didn't exist. As a matter of fact, the United States Congress and the Supreme Court did not think that they could make any drug illegal. They thought that it was a violation of the First Amendment. And so the first drug laws dealt with taxation issues. They issued license to folk to be pharmacists and so forth. And the first people who got locked up for selling drugs illegally were physicians. Because most illegal drugs in this country were introduced by the medical profession as they were trying to come up with formulations and medicines to help treat illnesses and diseases and to help manage pain. They were noble in their intent. The biggest cocaine addict in history was Sigmund Freud. And he was using it to treat folk and so forth. He thought he had found the miracle drug. And he had to leave the country himself to get himself together because he realized that he had become addicted. Drugs were inextricably woven to the fabric of this nation from the very beginning. And we were in the bed with South America as they were exporting their cocaine into this country. Most people don't realize that cocaine was used in almost everything from Coca-Cola to cough syrup to all of those medicines you could buy by mail order catalog. You actually could order cocaine from Sears and Roebuck. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Just watch the History Channel. Oh, this has been on the History Channel. It's all on the History Channel. I ordered the documentary tapes. Come to the office, I'll let you watch it. They did a 3-hour expose on the history of illegal drugs in America. And they showed how drugs became illegal and how it opened up an illegal economy. Because a few people decided it's time for us to do something with this. And from the very beginning, illegal drugs targeted poor and minority people. And it's always been their case. But let me tell you what the war on drugs was about. The war on drugs really picked up its momentum in 1968 with Richard Milhouse Nixon. He was the first one to declare war on drugs. And he sent his advisors to Vietnam, and they found a part of the problem in the Vietnam War is so many of our GIs were hooked on drugs. And so he decided we got to fight these drugs. We got to destroy these drugs. Now Nixon was a brilliant guy, but he was also paranoid. And so he'd come with some crazy, wacky ideas. And so Nixon started this war on drugs. And you know, he was a law and order guy, right? He's going to lock everybody up who disobeyed the law, protest too loudly, demonstrate too profoundly. We'll lock you up. He was a law and order guy, so he started the war on drugs. And then Ronald Reagan took it to a whole nother level when he came in. And his wife said, just say no. And Reagan said, just lock him up. And so we started this whole war on drugs. And then we passed a whole new set of laws when the American people were asleep when the laws were passed. It was called the Federal Mandatory Minimum Sentencing Laws that are racist in their whole intent and outcome. And so a young person with 5 grams of crack cocaine, if arrested, can be taken to the big house, the federal courthouse, tried and convicted, and receive a mandatory sentence of 5 years in federal penitentiary for 5 grams of crack cocaine, which is the equivalent of the... Yet, to get the same sentence for trafficking in white powder cocaine, and you gotta have the white powder to get the crack rocks, but because white powder cocaine is a drug of choice for the middle and upper middle class, black and white, to get the same sentence, it requires 500 grams. 100 times more drug to get the same sentence from basically the same drug. And so what are we doing? We declared war on poor people with this war on drugs, black folk in particular. And we see it fleshed out in Charleston, West Virginia. Truth seekers, right? And wherever it goes, we'll follow it. Pick up the newspaper and watch every time there's a drug bust done. And what you'll find is that 7 to 9 times every major drug bust is in Orchard Manor, Washington Manor, Roseburg Circle, the West Side, or East End, or somewhere in Kenoa City back up in the apartment complex. You almost never hear of a drug bust in South Hills, Kenoa City, Cross Lanes, or Edgewood. Yet all of the statistics that are being compiled by people who study this issue, here's what it says. The News Hour did a special about 6 months ago. They brought in a professor from Georgetown University. They brought in a former drug czar under the Reagan administration. They also had on the panel a former prosecuting attorney. But here's what all the data says. I'm not making this stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. What the data says is that the people groups in the United States possess and use drugs at basically their same percent representation in the society. Now let me break this thing down. Hispanics make up 11 to 12% of the nation's population. All of the study says Hispanics possess and use 11 to 12% of the drugs. Blacks make up 13% of the nation's population. All the study says blacks possess and use 13% of the drugs that are illegal. Whites make up 70+% of the nation's population, and all the study says that whites possess and use 70+% of all illegal drugs. But however, when you come to the whole issue of who gets arrested, it's a whole nother story. When it comes to arrests, even though blacks only possess and use about 14% of the drugs, they are arrested 35% of all arrests, 52% of all convictions, and 70% of all incarcerations for drug-related crimes. Yet they possess and use 13% of the drugs and end up incarcerating 70% of everybody in prisons and jails in the United States of America for drug offenses are from the black community, and no one is saying anything about it. Let me bring it and make it a little bit closer to home to you. Right here in Charleston, West Virginia. We're destroying a whole generation of people with this war on drugs. Now, I'm a law and order type of guy. If someone is violent, get them off the street and lock them up. Because we have to have civility, and we have to have order in a law and order society. But some of the things we're doing is illegal and immoral in the name of the law. In the name of the law. And we're destroying this country. We're destroying it. And let me tell you how it's been destroyed. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, every time we lock up a nonviolent young person because they have 5 rocks of crack cocaine in their pocket, and we run them downtown, and we say that we got you for a couple of sales. Now, if you will plead guilty, we'll give you probation, and we'll let you go home. And they say, okay, I'll take that. We just made them a convicted felon. We just made them a second-class citizen. We just disenfranchised and took away their right to vote. We just disqualified them from receiving federal aid to go to college. We just disqualified them from receiving a stipend to live in government projects. They can't get a real estate license, can't get a barber's license, can't work at a bank, and most of you in your company, you will not hire them either. Amen. You create a permanent underclass, and that's what we're doing. A permanent underclass is being created, and on the other side, we're driving the prison industry. The proliferation of the growth in prisons, all the money that's made by contractors, designers, engineers, and so forth. We're destroying this country. We're destroying it. And let me tell you when it's going to catch up with us if we're not careful. Who goes and fight wars? Young men normally, don't they? And they are young women. Every war that has been waged by this country, whether it's the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, Spanish-American War, the 2 big ones, 1 and 2, the Vietnam conflict that was never declared to be a war, or whether it was Desert Storm. Every one, young folk, are gone. But the problem is, every time we make these convicted felons, you know that they're disqualified from serving in the military. They can't serve in the military. And when this thing is going to come home, and when America's going to realize what she's done, is when they start sending your sons and your daughters and your grandson and your granddaughters off to fight this war that we got to fight because we've sold these wolf tickets. Now we got to deliver us, and we got to show up now and wage conflict anywhere there's terrorism. And they start bringing our kids back in body bags. And we start seeing able-bodied folk walking down the street. I'm not eligible. I can't go. I'm a convicted felon. Uncle Sam didn't want me then. I'm not qualified now. If I could advise George Bush to do one thing, I would say, Mr. President, you need to get together your wisest men and women, and you guys need to come up with some amnesty plan. And And you need to restore the citizenship birthrights to these young folks that have been taken away in the name of the war on drugs. Particularly these nonviolent offenders. Give these people back their right to vote. Give these people back their right to a life in this society, so they will be true patriots. And we waving all these flags, and we got them stuck on the back of automobiles, and they're flying in our homes. Don't you know since 9/11/01 that the enlistment in the United States military, the net is 0. There has not been no great enlisted people ready to sign up to go off and fight. And we feel like there's a great amount of patriotism because we get 100,000 people in a safe, secure football stadium, and they can sing Star Spangled Banner and America the Beautiful. But nobody's running to sign on the dotted line and say, send me, I'll go. Because the level of patriotism that we think exists does not exist among young people. Because too many of them have been stripped of their rights of enfranchisement and citizenship. Well, that's the crisis in education, the crisis in unemployment, the crisis in health, and the crisis in the criminal justice system. If I had more time, I would talk about some of the solutions, but I believe it was Kitterin that once said that a problem well defined is a problem half solved. And to we're willing to well define this problem and to realize how large it is, only then will we be willing to come together with the commitment and with the resources that we need to postulate a real solutions. I thank you for your attentiveness, and I would at this time be willing to entertain any questions or comments that you might have. Any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you so very much. I understood that you said you were going to solutions, but I have to ask what direction you would go in any event, because I see us in the country today as unsympathetic to people without, and unsympathetic to trying to find that sort of solution. So I'm hoping you will address that somewhat.
Here's where I think we need to go, is that we must go to the seats of power. And we must lay the argument out to them to where they realize that it is in their best interest. It's not about charity, it's not about altruism, it's about enlightened self-interest. They must understand it's in their enlightened self-interest to help the least that are among us. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, Economic Options Conference. Dr. Hammond from WVU, one of the preeminent economists in our state, points out something that many of us already knew. West Virginia has one of the highest out-migration rates of any states in the Union, and one of the lowest immigration rates. And so that's why we always have a net almost 0 population. With the number of deaths versus the number of births, the number of people leaving, the number of people coming in, we always almost net out almost at 0. But here's the problem. The people that leave are the fairest and the brightest. They're the college graduates. They're the well-trained. And so we got a brain drain. The people that remain are those that have been trapped in these poor-performing schools in these poor neighborhoods because poor people are less mobile and they have less options. What I'm trying to get the business community to understand that if we don't mobilize and empower the least that are among us, black and white, then we will lose our competitive advantage with neighboring states. We will not have a trained, educated, sophisticated workforce to maintain competitive advantage. So we will not get the Toyotas and the plants wanting to come here, knowing that the people that remain here are not being educated to the level they need to be productive. We must get people to understand this. We're not just do-gooders. We're trying to survive. And it's in their best interest to help us, to help these people we're trying to help, because these people are indispensable to our stability as a state and as a nation. Most people in positions of power, and most middle class, upper middle class, and wealthy people, they don't see the connection. They don't see the connection that as baby boomers get older and retire, and their incomes go down, as the educated people leave, what happens is taxes increase for those few people left working. Most people don't see that. And they don't realize that what we ought to try to do is have a goal of 100% employment and 0% unemployment. I know that is unrealistic, but we have to have a tax base large enough to support the infrastructure of the state. And everybody's crying about the tax so much, then you got to tax the whole few people that's working if you're going to have roads and schools and so forth. Number one, we got to get these people's attention because they create certain policies that hurt folk and cause pain, and they don't always understand that. Secondly, at the grassroots level, we've got to decide we're going to, if no one else does anything, we're going to do something. And we're going to mobilize, and we're going to mobilize at the grassroots level. We're going to mobilize around schools. We're going to have high expectations for students. We're going to hold teachers and school systems accountable and say mediocrity just simply is not acceptable. The public must get back to public education again. Thirdly, we've got to become watchdogs of the system. These people aren't smarter than we are, you see? They really aren't. And so for some reason, the public believes that just because someone runs for public office, that they got more insight, more wisdom, they're more intelligent. No, they just decided to run for public office. That's all. They just decided to run. It's not that they got anything that you and I don't have. They just decided to run. They had the gumption, they had the willingness to get out there and step up in the arena. And I applaud them for their courage and willingness to do that because it's not easy to be a public servant in our society today. But we've got to talk to these people. Here's what we think you need to be doing. We can't just turn these people loose down at the Capitol and think they're going to figure this thing out. Because some of them don't have a clue. Don't have a clue as to what really needs to be done. And so we got to speak to power, those economic power brokers, the political power brokers, and at the grassroots level, we got to come together and say, in this community, we're going to develop a system to help youth and to help their parents and to help people develop. And we're going to show that we really believe that people are our most precious resource. And we don't believe that in West Virginia. We say that, but we don't believe it. We treat people like dirt. We don't really believe it. I think that's where we start, but we don't wait for anybody's permission. We don't wait for anybody's permission. And most of the people that have problems with me understand. I get criticized because I'm a visionary leader. And everything I say isn't always right, but it's well thought out. And I can defend my position with statistics and data. Here's why I came to that conclusion. But I don't wait for nobody's permission, black or white. When I see what needs to be done, I'm going to step out and do it. You want to follow me? Let's go. And who wants to follow, let's get it done. I don't have time to try to persuade people, try to convince people, try to plead with people. I'm going to cast a vision. Here's what we think needs to be done. And we're going to step out and do what we can do and work with those who are willing to get it done. But we got to get this done. I got 5 children and 2 grandchildren and a blind dog that I'm responsible for. And I got to work in this community to try to make sure there's some opportunities for them in this community. And everybody ought to have a fair shake. And I can't say me and my 4 shut the door no more. I showed my church the other night. I told them, they said, well, you shouldn't be doing all this stuff. I said, I understand where you're coming from. Here's where I got a problem with it. Is that I've got 5 kids and I've got 2 grandchildren. I cannot do for them everything that they need to have done for them. Other people in the community are going to have to help them. And I want other people to want to help my kids. And so before I lay down at night, I pray to the Lord, I say, Lord, will you raise up people that will help my kids? And I'm going to try to do what I can do to help other folks' kids. But I know at the end of the day, my kids are going to need help somewhere at some time. And maybe there'll be somebody that will help them and will do for them what I try to do for somebody else's kids. That's what drives me to do what I do. It's not all true altruism. I realize that I live in this world. I can't commute back and forth to the moon. I got to live down here. And so I want to live in a place that is safe and secure and there's a good quality of life. And if my children are in a system where they can get a decent education, then how can I call myself a Christian? How can I call myself to be a follower of Jesus Christ, loving my neighbor as I love myself, and not want the same thing for them? If my son gets in trouble, I hope that somebody will come up here and say, look, he's been a pretty good boy, Judge. Plead for my boy, like I plead for other people's kids. We think that we are immune from these things. We are immune. Another question, I'm going to shut up. Any more questions? Yes.
Till we get around to straightening out some of these laws, what legal assistance has been available to some of the kids that you work with? Have you found much available?
What we have found is we have found some truly compassionate public defenders there's some hardworking people down there. Teresa Chisholm, Carol Brown. These people work hard. And we've worked with them. We found some compassionate attorneys that are for hire with their work with some of our kids. And we have found that judges have some compassion. And if you give them a reasonable alternative, that they're open to listening. One of my staff people back there, Sister Lavetta McKnight, who heads up one of our programs with at-risk youth, she spends quite a bit of time in court and writing alternative sentencing programs and going to the court and say, court, here's what we're willing to do, judge. We'll work with this kid. Here's what we're willing to do. Well, here's what we have found. We found that almost every judge that we've worked before, they've given us a fair hearing. And many of them have said, okay, we've tried everything else. We'll try your program. What we need is more people that will step up to the plate, people that will make contributions. This is a labor-intensive operation. You gotta have a person that can be there at the court hearing, to be there at the sentencing hearing, to be there to make the case, to be there to make sure the kid gets to the sentencing hearing, in the court hearing, to be there to get them back in school. This is not easy work. There's no magic wands out here. I got a staff of people, I put them up against any staff of people in the state of West Virginia. Nobody works as hard as they work. We got a kid down in Princeton, Lavetta McKnight gets in her car, drives all the way to Princeton to visit a kid in the Princeton Detention Center to find out where's this kid at. Because we're going to stand with this kid in court. Is this a kid that we really feel like we can stand there and put our credibility on the line? You know, I believe that the court is now open because the judges can figure this out. A couple of federal judges have called me and said, we want to find out more because we did some things in the federal court. They understand that the system isn't working. What I'm suggesting that the system never works if the public isn't involved. It never works. This is a democratic republic. This is a government of the people, for the people, by the people. If the people become spectators and bystanders, every system that we have, everyone that we have, will go defunct. It will not work. Government will not work unless there is an intelligent, informed populace holding politicians accountable. It will not work. School systems will not work unless there's an informed community at school